about different types of meetings.
Kind of like what would be a guideline of structure to do something like that.
I tell you what, in shaping a program for a place, you know, I mentioned about going in and meeting with the people, finding out how the place works. The other thing I want to know is who's in there. Now, I don't mean personal information, but I want to know who are the folks that are in that place. How long are they going to be there? You know, what are their circumstances? You know, I want a picture of that population. And, you know, I want to know how long they're going to be staying, because when you plan a program, it has to fit the environment it's going to work in. And that's why I don't like planning a program and then going trying to stick it in somewhere. You know, the program has to be designed to meet the needs of that particular group. I'll give you a real quick little example. We were going to do a program at a local jail, and so we went over and met with the sheriff and, you know, the leaders of that thing, and had them tell us about the place. Well, it turned out what we were talking about was a hot cot situation, by and large. They had a few folks that stayed around, but most of them were just sort of in and out like a bus station. Well, it was pretty clear when we got through, we were not going to do an AA meeting at all. That an AA meeting would have been a joke, because they couldn't even get there long enough to learn how to say the prayer, you know. And so what we wound up doing was putting together an AA information session. And we wound up with, I think, 7 topics or something of really relevant information that a guy needed to go. Our objective for that was to create enough interest that they would go to one meeting when they got out. That was realistic for that situation. So, you know, I've seen people try to do big book studies in a similar setting. And my God, that's ludicrous. And so when I'm doing a program, that's what I want to do, is make sure the program fits the needs of the group that you're dealing with, and make it fit that environment. Yeah. What was the other one?
Someone raised a question about having a round robin meeting, and I was wondering if that was something that you were familiar with, and if so, what is that?
Mm-hmm. So, round robin, you know. That's basically where you get together and folks from around an area and I hope eat. You don't usually eat those things. I'm not sure about that. I think they serve a great purpose. I think eating meetings serve a good purpose. And not just to eat, it's important to share gifts. And that's what you do at eat meeting, to share gifts. And so I think anything like that nurtures that spiritual bond that we've got. Yeah, and I think that's what a round robin does. That it sort of breaks down some of the distance between folk, gets unity, you address unity kinds of things, get to know your neighbor. It makes it a lot easier to line up speakers. Because a lot of times when I go there, man, I'm looking for talent. I'm going to get me some speakers when I go there. And so I think they serve a great purpose, and all it takes is just a little communication around a certain circle. Yeah, I think they're a great thing, and fairly easy to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I heard, I think it was Peggy on a tape say that there was a period when she was new in sobriety, the big book was not used, and that a lot of the recovery was based on a 24-hour-a-day book. But she never explained why. And I've always been curious, like, is that your understanding too? And if it is, what happened? What happened to the big book, and why did it disappear, and how did it come back into existence again with people taking it seriously and using it as a tool?
Let me take one whack at this, Sandy might. That is right. Now, I came in at a point when the big book, we love to talk about it. You talk about the book all the time, but it wasn't used very much. Yeah. And the 24-hour day book was, it wasn't even looked at as a bootleg piece of material like it is now. All they were doing was making up for our absence of it. It took us, 40 years to print one. And so it served a really useful tool. It was outside literature, but it was used. And part of it, the reason it fit in, now it's just personal bias, but part of the reason it fit in was, as Sandy described this earlier, we were moving out of a fairly religiosity-oriented program. In our early days, we still were pretty much, right down the line, a lot of old-fashioned religion permeated AA. And so the 24-hour day book fit in very comfortably, And some groups still use it to this day in preference to other materials. So I don't know why, but it was so popular, it made a great tool for conducting meetings. You see a lot of meetings that were used. A lot of people used it for the daily deal, just like it's intended. So it was a very, very popular thing. Big Book wasn't featured much. And you would hear people talk about it. All you got to do is look at the sales. Look at the sales and you can track the answer to your question. It wasn't heavily marketed in the program, wasn't heavily used. There was no such things as Big Book workshops. There was no such thing as Big Book studies. It was just something that was there, mostly used as a doorstop. And when you look, the first million, I can't remember this precisely, but it took us something like 30 years or so to sell 1 million books, no more than that. But does anybody know right off that? A long time, 35, huh? 35? I can't quite hear it, Chris.
40 years, took 40 years.
40 years.
Nixon
All right,
got the
40
first
years.
one.
It'd take an old person to know that. I took 40 years to sell 1 million. We gave out our 25 millionth copy at the International. The biggest boon to the sale of big books was treatment. At one time, I wish it weren't so, but it's so. At one time, the largest consumer of AA material, including the big book, was the Hazelden Corporation. And so what really led to the rocketing sales of big books was treatment. And they referred to the big book as the $30,000 book. And I don't know, it's a kind of an interesting history, but it's what it does. It tracks the development of the program.
Yeah, I got sober with Peggy. She's a year, 10 months ahead of me, but in Washington, D.C. And I still read the 24-hour day book every day. But I never bring it to an AA meeting or anything like that. And the old-timers in D.C. then talked about putting the plug in the jug and going to meetings. Put the plug in the jug and go to meetings. Put the plug in the jug. So I had 5 years, hadn't done any step work. And then it all started, and then the transformation took place, and then the light bulb went on inside, and you just start radiating, and that's what I believe is the most important thing to pass on.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
Don Bennett, alcoholic.
Hey, Don.
And I'm going to mention past delegate panel 53, Area 19, Chicago, because this question, and this is probably a good place to end. And I'm pretty sure Tom alluded to this morning, and it is a fact that hardly anyone ever talks about or mentions, but I know Tom talks about it, and I would not be surprised if Sandy talks about it also. But almost everyone that comes to Alcoholics Anonymous comes because of the work of one of the service committees of the General Service Conference. So I would just like you to comment on that, Tom, and Sandy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a very, very accurate statement. If you think about where alcoholics come from, if you look at one of the charts, it'll tell you where they come from. Every door is one where we do service, like correctional facilities. You got a lot of people who come into AA out of correctional facility. Treatment facility has been the greatest producer for a long time. Employee assistance programs have always been a heavy producer of AA members. At one time, they had 47% of our new members were coming out of employee assistance. So he's 100% right. If you look at where our service committees are, it's the places where we get people from. And we pretty well covered a community with those things too, by the way. But that's probably no accident. That I don't know if it's a cart for a horse or what, but it is a fact. And and when you consider that there's so much lacking in terms of full implementation, think about what a difference we could make with real crackerjack committees working, fostering relationships. With an awful lot of people, when they're dealing with a drunk, the best they know how to do is that. And so we can make a difference in that. And I sure hope that you guys will give serious thought to ways to foster the development of those things further. Yeah, that's a good point, Don, very much.
Tom?
Yeah.
He drinks because she nags, he thinks. She nags because he thinks, she thinks. Neither one would admit what is so obviously true, that he was a sod and she was a shoe.
Well, that's the ending for today then. Well stated.
Yeah, we're quitting.